You're listening to the Around the Huddle podcast, powered by PAC-Hub. Around the Huddle, college sports beyond the game.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Around the Huddle podcast, where we talk about all things college sports beyond the game. I'm John Gross, happy to have you with us today for what's going to be an amazing episode talking about one of my favorite sports. I do want to start by apologizing about two things. Number one, this is our first episode in a couple of weeks. I have been in the process of moving over the last couple of weeks. Anybody who knows how stressful, how time-consuming moving can be, you can understand why I had to miss a couple of weeks. But we are back with a great episode today, and we'll be back weekly moving forward. Number two, this might be a StreamYard issue. I don't know what's going on, but I apologize for the glitchy screen. Hopefully the audio should be fine, but I tried a bunch of different ways to potentially fix this glitchy screen. Still hasn't fixed things. So apologies about that. As always, our show is powered by our good friends at PAC-Hub. Take a look bottom of your screen, pac-hub.com. If you are a student athlete and you are looking for a new home, right, you enter the transfer portal, you might wonder, how can I get noticed? That is where PAC-Hub comes into play. When you enter the NCAA portal, you can also enter the PAC-Hub portal. By doing so, it populates a page with your name, your statistics, your measurables, your academic information, all sorts of specifications that allow coaches to search for you. And then from the coach's perspective, it saves you a lot of time. You don't have to parse through their website on their previous school's website to find their stats or find their information or wait for academic info. You can search for that missing piece, that right-handed pitcher, that point guard, that setter, whatever it might be. You can find it on PAC-Hub. So take a look, pac-hub.com. Again, pac-hub.com. All right, like I said earlier, volleyball is a favorite sport of mine. Anyone who knows me knows that. I grew up around the sport. My mom played in college. My dad plays to this day. Growing up as a Penn State fan, I've attended Penn State volleyball matches, both women's and men's, since birth. I grew up on Russ Rose and Mark Pavlik, and I had the opportunity back in 2017 to be the radio voice of the Penn State women's volleyball team, which was one of the greatest experiences of my life. We got to the Final Four, got to know Russ Rose extremely well. We'll always look back fondly on that season. And now I'm a play-by-play broadcaster in this amazing sport. So I figured let's have an episode talking about this wonderful sport, and let's do so by welcoming on a guy who is really one of the foremost voices in the media world covering college volleyball. His name is Daniel Gillman. He is the host of the Six Rotations podcast. We're going to dive into that in a second, but it's one of my go-to listens when it comes to college volleyball. He's also a play-by-play broadcaster for a multitude of networks. We're going to have an awesome discussion today about the growth of the sport, the changes of the sport, and what to look forward to as the 2025 season begins. So without further ado, let's welcome on our guest today, Daniel Gillman. Daniel, thanks for hopping on today.
How's it going, John?
It is great. Look, any day that I get to talk about volleyball is a great day. So it's going very well. How are you today?
Not too bad. You know, a lot of my days have been kind of leading up to the fall season, and now that we're in the full swing, I agree. It's great to have it. Even last night had a couple big upsets. UCLA, a top 20 team, went down to Pepperdine, and I got to watch my alma mater, Florida, kind of eke one out against USF. So it's definitely in that full swing, and it's always good to talk more about the sport.
Absolutely. Let's start with Six Rotations. We can give a little plug to that. Like I said, it's one of my go-to podcasts for college volleyball. So let our listeners know what they could expect when they tune into your show.
Yeah, the word podcast is kind of like a weird one because it's a video podcast essentially on YouTube. And every week on Tuesdays, Mick Haley, a legendary championship winning coach, and I break down the weekend in women's volleyball and kind of decipher where we think the teams should have been in the coaches poll and where they wound up, and kind of lead towards the upcoming weekend. We just started partnering with a great company, Ren Athletics, and we give away, jackets and shirts and different things to fans who send emails in and guess correctly on certain trivia questions, or put in kind of their favorite team of the week made up of the best stars of the weekend. So it's been a sport that's obviously exploded over the past few years. And I've just kind of been, I guess, like riding the wave, starting, I guess, kind of like early 2021 when everything kind of resumed after the shutdown. And we saw the NCAA tournament really start to kind of explode in the last 5 years.
Yeah, so let's start right there. As you said, you have been riding the wave of the meteoric rise of this sport. So what's it been like to cover this sport in what has probably been the most transformative few years in the sport's history?
I'm having a blast. And to be honest, it's something that is a unique combination because I didn't grow up in volleyball. I didn't play volleyball growing up. But when I got to the University of Florida, it was just a sport that I was able to fill in as a radio broadcaster as a junior in college. And I remember showing up to my first volleyball match. It was Florida against Florida State. I'm 20 years old. I have never watched non-Olympic volleyball before, and trying to keep pace and understand what the touches are. And so by learning the sport through broadcasting it for radio, and I don't know, John, if you've done radio for volleyball, but it is an adventure because you've got to call every touch. And then after college, I spent 3 years as the voice of Purdue volleyball. So I got to travel around the premier conference. Even before volleyball had exploded, Big Ten volleyball was legit. And, there were 8,000 to 10,000 fans going to all the matches in the Midwest, either Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, obviously heading out to Rec Hall in Penn State. And I got a glimpse, and this is before ESPN Plus. And so that was what was interesting when I talk to young broadcasters now, and immediately you just start working for ESPN Plus and you pick up those games. Back in 2018, you had to kind of get radio gigs and pick up maybe like simulcast, right? Like on PurdueSports.com or some of those random colleges. And so not a lot of people were watching it. Maybe there were 2 or 3 national broadcasts a week that were on ESPNU or ESPN2 or Big Ten Network started to really ramp up their coverage. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits. I leave Purdue. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life career-wise. You spend, 11 months or so not broadcasting sports. And then college volleyball comes back, and they had a shortened season in the spring of 2021. They didn't play, I guess volleyball in the SEC was played in the fall, but not many conferences played in the fall of 2020. So once the NCAA tournament came, and it was a bubble tournament in Omaha, all the matches in Omaha, and I was broadcasting Purdue remotely that season. And I remember kind of leading up into that tournament, John, there was not a lot of buzz. There wasn't any tournament preview shows. There wasn't really, it was just a selection show that ESPNU would hold. And even that was not the best if you ask volleyball fans. Usually it was right after a college basketball game. So if that went into overtime, everyone had to wait for the selection show, and we're all sitting in a room. And so what I decided to do, and this was April 2021, is I created my own show to preview the bracket release. And I had Zoom calls with 48 different people in a 2-day span because there were 48 teams in that shortened tournament. And I talked to either a coach or a broadcaster or a player of every team just to kind of get a 5 to 6 minute, hey, tell me about Morehead State, or let's hear about McNeese State, some of the schools that not a lot of people were familiar with. And then the Coaches Association kind of reached out to me, headed by the legendary Kathy DeBoer, who is one of the reasons why women's volleyball even exists, a Title IX pioneer back in her Michigan State days. And so she was the head of AVCA. She reached out, we kind of connected and kind of transformed it into okay, let's start to cover the sport a little bit more. Let's inject a little bit of youth. At the time I was in my mid-20s, and I can kind of bring that passion and youth to cover it. And so we're sitting on our 5th year of August to December coverage of women's volleyball. And I host the fan experience at the Final Four through that. And the connections are obviously incredible to make when you could just show up to events and you're one of the people that covers a sport that not a lot of people can cover. You feel like you're a part of a cool crew. And then now join the bandwagon. If you guys at home, you want to cover this sport, start your own show, right? Because there's no such thing as too many people covering a sport.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, joining the bandwagon, because in even those early years that you were probably doing the show, and of course the years before that, I feel like volleyball was about volleyball people. It was specific to volleyball fans. In recent years, it has gone from just volleyball fans, volleyball people, to now being sports fans at large, and maybe even not sports fans who were just flipping through channels and they become enamored with it. I'll never forget when I was in college, I had a similar role to you at Florida. I was the radio voice for the Penn State women's volleyball team in 2017. We actually got to the Final Four. Florida was another participant in the Final Four that season. But I remember telling some friends, like, hey, come on out to one of these matches. You're going to love it. They had never watched the sport before. They come out. They were hooked. They'd go back for more. Some of them went to the student section called the Wrecking Crew. They loved it. So what is it about this sport that you think has led to this meteoric rise in volleyball, in its popularity in recent years?
I think there are a couple key contributors to this sport gaining popularity. And the number one is the pace. And that's why I think broadcasters also love when they learn the sport. It's hard to compare it to a basketball or a soccer or a baseball, because in volleyball, you are going to have, 40 to 50 big plays every set. It's not, waiting for that big up. No, like you are going to have a big play almost every play, and that leads to the excitement level. And then you only have about 20 seconds between plays. You don't have to kill a lot of time. Your analyst will jump in. But as a fan watching at home, the quickness of the match, you might have an hour and 20 minutes if it's a sweep. But even so, you're not going to have a 4-hour match. It's going to be 2.5 hours if they go to 5 sets. And I think that speed of the sport itself, and then also the way that we intake media nowadays. I'm not sure if it would have this popularity in the 80s, but the way that we can consume media, the quicker it is, the better it can absorb into, the younger generations. And so I think a lot of people are kind of turning it on or showing up to a match. And they're like, man, this is fast and this is fun. And there's not a lot of downtime. And I think that's probably the top contributor. There's no doubt that volleyball is a sport that everyone rallies around in the Olympics. And so I think people can kind of dip into that. And we're seeing that with gymnastics. I think gymnastics is on a very similar trajectory. I know you and I both commentate, college women's gymnastics in the spring. And I think that's another thing where I was able to broadcast, Bree Clark doing the biles last year for Clemson. And once that caught a wind of mainstream, I'm seeing the same trajectory with volleyball and gymnastics, where it's like, I've got a list here. There were 3 matches last season that had over 1 million viewers nationally. That is just such a significant rise from 3 years ago. The semifinals each had 1 million, championship had 1.3. And then you had a couple regular season matches on Fox and NBC. And John, we're sitting here 10 days into the regular season, and there have been 20 national TV games, 5 on Fox. ESPN has picked up so many. And then we haven't talked about all the coverage that Big Ten Network provides. Just being able to go to a sports bar and have women's volleyball on is transcendental for this sport, because I'll never forget, as a student at Florida, celebrating my 21st birthday in Las Vegas and getting MGM, the sports book, to turn on the Elite Eight, Florida against Texas. And the strings I had to pull, I had to lie to them and tell them that I bet on it, because they have a rule. You could only put on a game if you bet on it. But at the time, you couldn't bet on women's volleyball. Now there's some small markets, but I think we need to see there's even more space for growth if you bring in the sports betting population and kind of open up. We're seeing that from the pro leagues, open up sports betting to this, because if you can turn it on at a sports bar, you got to be able to open your app and have the common average football, basketball fan bet on it. And then there's millions more to be, grabbed for viewership.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm one of the PAC-Hub's AI specialists. Today, I want to show you why PAC-Hub is the ultimate platform for college baseball players looking to transfer to a new college program. First, let's take a look at our extensive network of coaches. With over 150 coaches actively using our system, you have a huge pool of experts to connect with. Imagine having access to all these experienced coaches searching for talent like yours. You even have the ability to connect with any of these coaches via our internal messaging system. This means more opportunities to showcase your skills and find the perfect new team. Now let's switch gears and see things from a coach's perspective. Coaches can easily search for athletes by position or stat. Let's say I'm looking for a left-handed pitcher with good pitching stats. With just a few clicks, I can find top-performing pitchers who meet my criteria. This efficient search functionality ensures that coaches find the perfect fit for their teams and athletes get matched with opportunities that suit their strengths. PAC-Hub is all about connecting talent with opportunity. Whether you're an athlete looking to transfer to a new college team or a coach searching for the next star player, PAC-Hub has the tools you need to succeed. Don't miss out on the chance to be part of this amazing community. Join PAC-Hub today and take the next step in your baseball journey. Visit www.pac-hub.com to sign up now.
You referenced the growth in viewership. The 2024 season was ESPN's most watched volleyball season ever. I have a feeling that 2025 will surpass that. But I mean, you could go and you said it earlier when you were at Purdue, they didn't have those streaming opportunities. It was radio, maybe the occasional simulcast. Now, if you want to watch literally any D1, even D2, even D3 broadcast out there, you can, whether it's ESPN Plus, Big Ten Network Plus, a school specific streaming platform. So how important has the growth in streaming options for people to lock into games? How important has that been for the growth of this sport?
I'd say it's everything, to be honest. Without the streaming services, without the heads of ESPN, Fox, NBC, and, I guess Fox is Big Ten Network. Without those heads agreeing we are going to champion this sport, I'm not sure we see this growth. There would be growth for sure. People will find ways. But if you're not putting women's volleyball on national television, starting in 2022, 23 was really that beginning. You're starting to see it. Now we've seen 2 weeks in a row to start the year, John. ESPN has had a studio show on site. That is so unfathomable. Amazing. From a few years ago to think that they are going to have a regular season match with a college basketball style, in the beginning of they play at Madison Square Garden every year and they do the CFB rankings and you've got the whole college basketball crew courtside. They now have that with Mary Wise and Eric Freed and Emily Eman just doing a tremendous job over on ESPN with that. And then we kind of swing over to the NBC and Fox coverage. And if you're a women's volleyball fan, or if you want to be, turning on these games is the only way for it to get more coverage because the Nielsen ratings are so important, how many viewership numbers are there and the different people. But one thing that the metrics are telling us as volleyball broadcasters are that a lot of people are still just kind of somewhat casual fans. And so the important part from a broadcasting side is to try to weave in the diehards and the novices. And without being too obvious, kind of, hey, remember, it's a win by 2 set. Or, by the way, they can't contact the ball above their head if they're a back row player in front of that 10-foot line. So those are the little ways that we want more people to learn the sport, but we don't want to anger those diehards. It's oh, these broadcasters are just talking dumb to me. So that's an interesting navigation. But I'll tell you, you talk about Penn State, and I've got to bring up this story because I think the match that made me really fall in love with volleyball was my first year at Purdue. And this is a reason why people love this sport. And it's because the art of the reverse sweep, same in tennis, every set, it doesn't matter what happened last set, and you can get absolutely wiped off the floor in set 2, John, and go down 2-0. And here it is, Purdue, Penn State, 2018, on the road, Halloween night. Rec Hall is absolutely delirious. Everyone wearing their costumes. I've got goosebumps thinking about it. I'm all the way up. You know where they put the broadcasters at Rec Hall?
Yes.
You've got to bring binoculars.
Yep,
Probably going to start a nosebleed. And Purdue was down 2-0. It was ugly. They had pulled their starters in the second set. Penn State's top 10. Boilermakers are probably in the 15 to 18 range. And I am somewhat scrambling because some coaches will leave you when you work the radio team. And I've been left doing Florida softball in Kentucky before because when a team loses and the coach is not happy, they are not sitting around waiting for the radio person to show up to the bus. So I'm somewhat packing up my stuff. I'm texting one of the assistants being hey, just make sure coach doesn't leave me. I don't want to get stranded because it's not like you can catch a casual commercial flight from Happy Valley. So you got to get on that. You got to get on that private jet. And so obviously the story, opens up a bit. Purdue comes back to win the third. They win the fourth. And then 2018, Purdue wins the fifth set, and it was unreal, an unreal memory. Team is electric, and it's just one of those vibes that you can't replicate. You get huge comebacks in other sports, but this is one where the reverse sweep, the art of it, just feels so poetic. And when you see it, when you're down 2-0 and you start to creep up that momentum, it's like a Tiger Woods comeback, on the back nine of Augusta or something like that.
It is a magical thing to watch. And speaking of the Big Ten, I think when it comes to the casual fans, or maybe those who aren't familiar with volleyball, when you think about volleyball, you may think about West Coast, California. But when it comes to college volleyball, the Big Ten is without a doubt the conference. The legendary coaches, Russ Rose, John Cook, you were at Purdue, Dave Shondell, the iconic players, the national championships. What role has the Big Ten Conference played in the growth and popularity of this sport, and really this sport becoming a well-known D1 sport in general?
Yeah, I hesitate to make too many comparisons to other sports, but SEC football has been the dominant powerhouse for 15 to 20 years, right? And with Alabama kind of struggling here lately, everyone's talking about the last time Alabama wasn't in the top 20, something like that. And that's kind of what it feels like with Big Ten volleyball. And the West Coast and the Pac-12, they owned volleyball through the 70s and the 80s. And then the 90s, we saw a little bit of that shift. And then you saw the dominant teams in the 2000s and the 2010s of Penn State. And then you start to see that Nebraska coverage and the fans start flocking to it. It's interesting because it's not like the Big Ten teams wins every year. And in fact, the last few years, we've seen Texas kind of take the reins and win back-to-back. Stanford has won 3 of the last 10. It's just the fact that they bring the most fans and they care the most. And there's no hesitating that sentence. There is without a doubt 92,000 people who can say they went to a volleyball match in Nebraska. And it's insane. It's the most attended women's sporting event in world history, what Nebraska was able to do against Omaha in Memorial Stadium. It's one of those things where Memorial Stadium, is that what it's called? I think so.
Yep, Memorial Stadium.
Yeah. And so it's just one of those you can't replicate. And I'm so happy I got to be a part of Big Ten volleyball, because I think if I was kind of like the voice of Kansas volleyball, which was another option when I left college, I don't think I would have had that same passion for this sport, but I was able to see what it means to the folks in Iowa and, go out to Champaign, because I don't think anyone has more dedicated fans than Illinois. I mean, they will go on the road and pretend to be Purdue fans. And then right when the match starts, they take off the Purdue clothes and represent all of the Illinois block party. It is such a cool thing to see. And, you see the frustration from the fan bases. That is something that you see in college football, the dedication and the obsession. And so to see volleyball kind of grab that, Big Ten Network is without a doubt the reason why ESPN is covering so much volleyball. Big Ten Network showed the world, hey, we can get viewership. This can be sustainable even on college football days. Big Ten will sometimes put on a volleyball match, and it's a great sign to see. And Sue Marriott is kind of the head of that ship that carries the night in Big Ten volleyball. She is the coordinating producer of Big Ten Network, and she makes it all work so effortlessly. And they do a tremendous job, whether it's Big Ten versus Big Ten or non-con play. And I think they went up to Sioux Falls for opening weekend last week on Monday and did those 2 matches. And it's like wherever they need to be, Big Ten Network finds a way to get there. Now ESPN has caught up, and it's like the 2 of them are covering volleyball at a very equal rate. And it's fun to see. And I'm glad that there's not like an unhealthy competition. This is a sport that everyone wants to succeed. And you're seeing that with the pro leagues. Even though there's competing pro leagues, there are certainly a lot of people that are trying to support both of them.
Yeah, let's dive into the pro leagues, because I want to touch on that. When I look at the next step in the growth of volleyball, I feel like the pro leagues plays a major role in that. We just saw the one merger. Now it's the Major League Volleyball, of course, League One Volleyball in, I believe its second year of existence. So what do you feel that is the next step in the growth of this great sport, really creating a solidified, strong pro league or two leagues?
Absolutely. And we're already here, right? We're 2 years in to that Pro Volleyball Federation, which was the Kickstarter to traditional professional women's volleyball in America. There was another league called Athletes Unlimited that has been going for, half a decade, but that's a little bit more of a tournament style training camp. Let's keep you guys fit and give you guys a little bit of money, but it's just kind of a 6-week stretch or 4 to 5 week stretch where they play in one location and top players will play. But now there's a traditional traveling league that has teams in Omaha, San Diego, Vegas, Columbus. There's going to be a team in Dallas, Atlanta, Orlando, right? There's enough spread, Grand Rapids, where even though Omaha is the epicenter, and that's the reason why you see this merger, this new league, MLV, was able to grab Omaha, take advantage of owner disagreements in the last year and a half. And the PVF was kind of forced to say, you know what, if you have all this money and you already grabbed our best team, let's go ahead and just join forces. And MLV is a nice name. It flows a little bit better than PVF. I work for the league and I commentate, games for them. And so League One is kind of different. And it's a little bit better level if you are a volleyball purist. Now MLV is more of like, hey, let's just get a ton of these really fun names that you guys all watched in college, and we've got them all. And Morgan Hens is a stud, and we've got Leah Edmond, the MVP. And every once in a while, we're going to grab someone internationally like Betty Dela Cruz, who's an Olympic, serving specialist of sorts for the Dominican Republic. But League One got all the Olympians, and they've got the top level, and it's fun to watch. But it's not traditional pro style. It's a little bit more like club style where they get everyone to like one location per week or per month. And they tried a little bit to chivvy it up, but they don't have team names. So I still think there is room to grow for League One, where I think the PVF and now MLV have really found their groove, and they do it the same way the MLB and the NFL, they have got a traditional home and away schedule with a playoff format. Maybe playoff format that still can use a little tinkering because it's all in one location. But the first year they did it in Omaha, and it was a sellout every match. Last year was Vegas and a little bit less success. So I'm curious to see the way it goes, but I want them both to succeed. I think it's possible that we can have two, maybe in 5 to 10 years, we'll see an AFL, NFL style combination, or maybe we'll see a championship between the champions from each one. And
I'd love that.
Yeah, there's a possibility for all of it, but at the end of the day, it's business, and these are very business first entities. And I am not someone that's going to get involved in like the finance and the business side of things. I'm just happy that the leagues exist and we can see some of the best players, because when you and I were students and we left college, the players that left college with us, we didn't really follow, right? They went to Brazil or Portugal or South Korea. And it's not like you're watching Nia Washington out there, or, necessarily like following Nia Reed, or, I remember Kendall White when I first saw her in the Pro Volleyball Federation. I'm like, man, what a throwback this is to see like the ultimate libero come back to America and get to play alongside Yassiana Presley and Stephanie Samity. And so like these names for volleyball fans, I think bring the connection to this pro movement. And we'll see. It really depends on you guys all watching and the fans at home. And, the fact that they've gotten deals with streaming services, right? PVF MLV is now on Fox Sports 1 and CBS Sports Network and Roku and YouTube. And so you can kind of turn it on. League One, I think, is on DAZN and ESPN Plus and ESPNU and 2. And so you can kind of watch volleyball even if it's not the fall. And so that's really nice to see.
Hi, I'm Michael. I'm one of the PAC-Hub's AI specialists. Today, I want to show you why PAC-Hub is the ultimate platform for college baseball players looking to transfer to a new college program. First, let's take a look at our extensive network of coaches. With over 150 coaches actively using our system, you have a huge pool of experts to connect with. Imagine having access to all these experienced coaches searching for talent like yours. You even have the ability to connect with any of these coaches via our internal messaging system. This means more opportunities to showcase your skills and find the perfect new team. Now let's switch gears and see things from a coach's perspective. Coaches can easily search for athletes by position or stat. Let's say I'm looking for a left-handed pitcher with good pitching stats. With just a few clicks, I can find top-performing pitchers who meet my criteria. This efficient search functionality ensures that coaches find the perfect fit for their teams and athletes get matched with opportunities that suit their strengths. PAC-Hub is all about connecting talent with opportunity. Whether you're an athlete looking to transfer to a new college team or a coach searching for the next star player, PAC-Hub has the tools you need to succeed. Don't miss out on the chance to be part of this amazing community. Join PAC-Hub today and take the next step in your baseball journey. Visit www.pac-hub.com to sign up now.
Nothing made me happier than being able to watch Haley Washington play in the U.S. She's one of my favorite people I've ever encountered in any sport I've ever covered. Getting to know her in 2017 was amazing. She's awesome. And now she's with Salt Lake and League One Volleyball. So it's been great to have her back stateside. One final topic that I want to touch on with you. We always talk about the ever-changing landscape of college athletics on the show. And of course, NIL and the transfer portal also impacting college volleyball. I'm going to drop this number for you. According to Open Doors, women's volleyball NIL increased by 935% from July 2021, when NIL began, through July 2024. That number has certainly increased since last July, but that's just the most recent data that we have had. So what's the state of play in terms of NIL and the transfer portal in the world of college volleyball?
I mean, it's status quo in all college sports now, it feels like. And what's interesting, John, is I remember the beginning of it in 2021, and it kind of started pretty organically with, hey, now you guys can host camps in the summer, and it'll be a Morgan Hens sponsored camp, or, insert player name, right? And they could still be college athletes and getting paid for it. And then the companies that created the swag and the gear started partnering with the players, but it wasn't really the same way that we're seeing Arch Manning and Carson Beck get, $3, $4, $5 million. But it started to move when Texas started making moves 2 years ago to grab players in that portal and give them legit money. And, Avery Skinner was a standout for Kentucky. Her sister Maddie won a championship with Kentucky. And then all of a sudden, Maddie Skinner's transferring to Texas. And that was like the big news. It was like the first really big move, if I can remember correctly, in the transfer portal NIL era of women's volleyball. And then Maddie Skinner goes and wins a championship with Texas. And it's like, oh, this can work. And we're seeing it with softball too. I mean, Texas Tech had never made the Women's College World Series. They spent $1 million on Nigeri Kennedy, the starting pitcher from Stanford, a two-way threat. They reached the championship this past year in their first year with Kennedy. So I think those oil tycoons and, whether it be a Microsoft billionaire, one or two out there, if they want to turn their sights to volleyball, they can certainly make waves for certain teams. SMU made a massive NIL commitment last year, and they went from a nobody in women's volleyball to a top 10 caliber team. Now they're sitting at 11th in the country. They again lost everyone that they brought in, and they've gone and reloaded with transfers left and right as well. 2 from USC. They got a standout, pin hitter from Colorado State, and they're paying for him. And that's just, the way that we saw Purdue dismantled this last offseason was because of NIL. And so there are negatives to it. Ohio State and Purdue both did not commit NIL funds to volleyball. And we saw an exodus from their volleyball teams in the last 2 years. And Jen Flynn Oldenburg, Dave Shondell have not been shy about that difficulty. The 2 top players in the Big Ten, arguably, were both on Purdue last year. Eva Hudson, Chloe Chacon. They both transferred out this offseason to Louisville and Kentucky, who certainly paid $500,000 or so for each one. And so, I like the transparency. I don't want there to be secrets about how much these players are getting. The transparency makes it more like a top caliber sport, because we know how much Bryce Underwood gets to play at Michigan. we know the transfers and the NIL money going on in basketball. So why not make it an open, book policy for volleyball? Because I think that the openness and the communication could lead to more success for the sport. Now, I don't really know, again, I don't involve myself with the finances and how the new bill that passed this last year, I'm getting texts from coaches that the new Congress situation that the teams can now play, or that the university can pay the players specifically. That's a real wrinkle. And I'm not really sure how all that's going to work out, but hopefully it means that, Marquette's players that may not get, direct NIL money can find their way with a couple $1,000s every month. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, that's a great point you bring up. We've talked about the House settlement on this show ad nauseum, and about $21 million now at the disposal of schools. If they so choose to reach that amount, they can divvy that up however they want. Like you said, still remains to be seen how teams utilize that money towards volleyball, if they do utilize it towards volleyball, but definitely something to consider. You also referenced softball. If anybody's watching this and they want to learn more about the state of softball, we had an episode a couple months back with one of the greatest college softball players ever, Lauren Hager, talking about NIL and the sport and so many things in that show. So check that out. But all right, Daniel, this was fantastic. We appreciate your time and insight. Keep crushing it in the world of volleyball. And again, check them out. 6 rotations on YouTube. Such an awesome show. And hey, great to speak with you.
Yeah, you too, John. Thanks so much.
All right, there you have it. Daniel Gillman, one of the foremost voices in the world of college volleyball, breaking down this amazing sport. Big thanks to all of you for joining us. One final reminder, take a look bottom of your screen, pac-hub.com. PAC-Hub, connecting athletes with opportunities. If you're a student athlete in the portal, if you're a coach looking for that missing piece, PAC-Hub is a great way to streamline and simplify the process, make that connection, and really expedite the process of being in the portal. We'll be back soon with a new episode. Until then, I'm John Gross, saying so long.